Right, Dampy Hands is what one of my students called this technique, and it's basically the technique you need when you get an unwanted open strings ringing out while you're playing all those notes that you spent ages learning, and it really undoes a lot of your work, makes you sound quite amateurish if you're not careful. So it kind of sounds like this. So it's the unwanted open strings ringing out in sympathy with the notes that you're playing. And it most often happens with distorted lead lines and things like that, which should sound super smooth. And instead you're getting this. If you ever get this, then the best way out of it is to think of the picking hand as the hand that dampens all the thicker strings above the string that you're playing, and the fretting hand should dampen all the thinner strings below the string that you're meaning to play. So most people don't struggle too much with the fretting hand bit. As long as you're not too much on the tips of the fingers and you're a bit more on the pads of the fingers for lead playing, then you're naturally going to just lean on those thinner strings, and that's going to keep them quiet. So the picking hand is a bit more often where people get stuck. For me, it's the bottom bony bit of the little finger there that rests on the bridge pickup, more or less, depending on what string I'm playing. And as I play different strings, I'll kind of move the shoulder to decide which string I'm playing so that the wrist can stay straight and my picking is kind of consistent. So I'll show you what I mean. When I play the thinner strings, my shoulder is dropping and I'm resting more on the strings themselves to keep them quiet. So I'm playing those thinner strings. When I play the thicker strings, my shoulder moves up and that bony bit is now resting on the body of the guitar more, so that the strings have space to ring out. But my wrist is always straight. So see if you can see that movement in the shoulder as I pick different strings. So you want that. If you move at the wrist, it'll be more like this and it won't sound as good. Just doesn't feel as good when you move with the wrist like that. It's really inconsistent with the angle of the pick and things. Now there are plenty of exceptions, so you might see players hook the thumb around the neck to dampen the unwanted thicker strings instead of using the right hand, and that's really good for particularly kind of percussive bluesy techniques, and you'll see Stevie Ray Vaughan and people like that doing this sort of technique. And that's really fun. The other thing that you might see is when players kind of bend out their wrist here, so they're obviously not resting on the thicker strings, and it gives them a particular kind of angle with the pick. I see it a lot with speed pickers. I've seen Eddie Van Halen pick like this, where they're just on the thinner strings, kind of really getting lots of speed, and they're playing so many notes that you don't get a chance to hear the unwanted open strings from ringing out. So that's another exception. So just as a general rule, I think Dampy Hands, the way I've explained it though, is kind of the way to go. It's a good approach to getting you a more professional sound with less open strings ringing out. This next technique issue was most memorably described to me by a student who was complaining of sounding like a cow, and what he was doing was this sort of thing. I hope you can hear what he was talking about, and while it's just an extreme example of someone pressing down on the strings too hard, so much so in this case where he's bending the strings out of tune, and then as the hand relaxes the pitch drops a little bit and it has that, you know, cow-like quality. Even if you're not pressing the string down so hard that it bends out of tune, if you're just pressing down more than is needed, it kind of tends to glue your hand up and you can't move it as fluidly, and that's really what you're after. That's the best word I can think of to describe it. You want that fluid sound of being really relaxed, and your hands can just move that much more easily. So instead of this sort of thing, where there's lots of movement and it feels sticky, you're after a much more relaxed kind of fluid motion. Some of it does have an effect on kind of how hard you're picking with the pick, and that has something to do with the sound as well. I've got another video up on that, which I'll put a link to above if you're interested in that. A really good way to work on this is to play an individual note in the part that you're trying to learn and actually intentionally get a bit of fret buzz. Find that amount of pressure there and then just add a tiny bit more pressure, and that should get you a clean note, and that's all the pressure you need. Try that in, you know, all the notes in the phrase until, say that's the phrase, until you can play it and really relaxed. And as you increase the speed, try and keep that fluidity, try and keep that, you know, light touch. And you can normally get a good amount of speed that way. It's always going to work best with parts that you've already practiced a lot, because your hands are going to be that much more familiar with it. They're not going to naturally tense up because you're not forcing them to do things, you know, you're not trying to manipulate them into doing what they're not familiar with. But you can see the comparison if I try and play that a little bit more tensed up now. I just can't control it in the same way as I can when I'm relaxed. It goes out of sync with the right hand picking, and it just doesn't, it feels sticky and kind of gluey. Okay, now for the third technique, but before we do, if you're finding this video useful, think about liking the video and maybe subscribing to the channel if you want to see more videos like this on guitar playing, just because I don't really know if anyone's finding this stuff very useful otherwise. But anyway, the third technique is what I call door handle vibrato. And while there's lots of different types of vibrato that you can do, what I see a lot of students doing is the up and down vibrato, where they're making the movement come from the finger itself, kind of like that. And it's tempting to do because it gets you the sound, it's all right, you know, but it'll never get as fluent as something like this door handle vibrato I'll show you, where the movement is coming more from the wrist, and it's literally like you're turning a door handle. It's that motion. The only difference I'd probably say is that the grip is mostly coming from the little finger, and it's just holding the neck with the thumb, just sort of resting over the top of the neck maybe. There or on the back of the neck a touch. So the motion is coming from that joint in the little finger, that knuckle. And that way you can get that nice speed in the vibrato that you'd never be able to get from just using the fingers. Again, just like what we were talking about before with fretting notes as gently as you can so you can increase that fluent kind of feel, that fluidity. The same applies for this vibrato. It might, if you're not used to doing this kind of motion, it might be a bit tense at first and not really be able to get much speed up. But as you become more familiar with the motion, your hand will be able to relax and you'll be able to get that speed in the vibrato. But for now, you know, if you're not used to it, just for now do it slowly and just get used to that angle. Try it on different strings. And it will become second nature after a while. Let me know down in the comments if any of those techniques are things that you've had to work on yourself at all. And I hope that's helped someone improve their tone a little bit. Thanks for watching.